Everyone, welcome to today. I'm excited for Ben Cook to be with us. My voice is a little funny. I've been sick, so apologies. Sound like I've been smoking a lot lately, which I haven't. But excited for Ben to join us. Ben is somebody I admire. I had a chance to work with Ben for about a year at another company, and I felt like he was a great mentor to me. He's had a senior leadership positions at some amazing companies: Ford, Apple, Walmart, CBRE, Target, Kimberly-Clark, and even Home Depot. He started his career in the military, and he's just a highly principled leader. Excited for him to kind of walk us through his journey and what he's learned. Ben, welcome.
Thank you, Thad. Thanks for inviting me today. Honored to be here.
Yeah, no, thank you. And if you want to just take 90 seconds, give us elevator pitch of who you are, just so people can kind of get a brief summary before we jump into some, more meaningful topics.
Sounds great. Yeah, I think the best way to describe myself is someone that has experienced a lot of things in life, and we'll probably talk more about it later. But I think I'm on my 22nd move now, so I'm not necessarily proud of that. But I grew up really just kind of humble, kind of upbringing. Dad was a high school football coach. Never made a lot of money, but he had a lot of impact on people. And so I think he's really kind of helped shape who I am in terms of just like my principles and what I live by from a leader. But yeah, grew up moving around quite a bit. Had a chance to live in Spain for 2 years when I was in high school. My dad did some nonprofit work in North Africa, and I attended an international school. And I think that had a huge impact on me because I've been really big on just global business, working with people from all different cultures, all walks of life. And I'd say I'm a very man of deep faith and just, very focused on trying to be a good steward of the time that I've been given on this planet and just make sure that I'm trying to invest in people and just making things better, at least better than what was given to me when I came into the world.
I love that, man. You mentioned your dad there. He was a high school football coach. I always tell people that maybe the most influential person in my life early on was my high school football coach, and just the principles that he taught me and
Yeah.
the motivation. He said he was super impactful. In some ways, do you envy his life that was maybe a little different than yours as a, high profile business leader?
I'm happy with the path that I'm on, but I'd say, I'll give you like maybe just some context. At his funeral, he passed away back in 2011. But at his funeral, there were people that showed up that he had seen in like 30 years. It was crazy. There was a guy that did an op-ed piece in the local newspaper, and like he had played for my dad like, I don't know, 20 seasons previously, 25. Like he hadn't seen him since. I have another person that I reconnected with. He's a friend of mine, and he just always is talking about my dad and the impact he had on him. So I'm glad to hear like other people were impacted positively. I think it was funny. There was a period of my life where I wanted to be a football coach as well. I wanted to be a college. I never wanted to be a head coach. I wanted to be an offensive coordinator. Like that was my dream, but I never pursued it. So I do maybe that one. Maybe yes, still kind of
Maybe.
with college football season right now. It
I
pulled
know.
me in the press box right now, calling plays for one of these teams in the playoffs.
Wouldn't it? It would be so cool. It's funny because I went to a funeral last year for my wife's grandma or grandpa, and he was a high school chemistry teacher.
Okay.
So he started out as a nuclear engineer,
Uh-huh.
and then in the 50s or 60s, his job got cut from the plant. And he went from making a ton of money as a nuclear engineer to now being a high school teacher. And he did that for the next 30 or 40 years. And in all ways, financially, he was not successful. But at his funeral, I have attended very few funerals where people got up from all areas of his life and
Yeah.
talked about the impact they made on his
Wow.
life.
Wow.
And, from my perspective, he was a high school science teacher. And I think I never really looked at him as more than that. And it was a poor judgment on my end. But just to see the impact he made was really, really meaningful. And so you talk about your dad too. I think that, I think it reprioritizes things if you look at it that way.
I think they're the overlooking heroes a lot of times, our teachers and coaches,
Yeah.
and I'll say growing up, the thing I didn't envy, like I probably envied a lot of the things that my friends had that we didn't have because again,
Yeah.
he didn't make much money. But his income didn't measure, or didn't equate to his impact. Like that's
Yeah.
the one thing that I take away is his impact was much larger than his income ever was. And at the end of the day, I think that's what matters most.
So Ben, the first time I remember having maybe a deep conversation with you, you told me you almost like as a father mentor type person. I remember you kind of grabbed me and you said, make sure to enjoy these moments with your kids when they're
Yeah.
young. And you said it almost regretfully in a way that, you wished maybe you had done something different as you climbed the corporate ladder. Can you talk to me? I mean, this is kind of jumping deep really quick, but would love to hear kind of more backstory on that and explain to me maybe some of that.
Yeah, you'll never, time's perishable, you never get it back. I have so many great memories of my kids, growing up. I think, and I'll maybe put it in two different phases. So when my kids were young, at the time I was my first daughter, when she was born, I was at home working at Home Depot, and I was traveling, I don't know, a good 70% of the time. And I remember I went on a long trip. It was about, I can't remember how long it was. It was at least 4 weeks. It may have been even up to 6 weeks, but I was going through this blitz of all these factories in Asia. So we were looking for new sources of product. We were setting up new methods for supply chain and distributing products differently. And so it was an intense time in my career. Well, I remember coming back from this trip, and now let's just say it was 6 weeks. My daughter didn't know who I was. I walked in the house. She was little, so to be
Yeah,
fair, I think she had just started walking, but like she was startled by me. She didn't know who I was. Like that was a moment where I said, wow, I need to make a change. And so I ended up making a change. I had a career change, which then when my younger daughter was born, I was there a lot more for her and for both of them for a period of time. So I'd say there was a period of time for like 5 years where I was really fully invested in my kids. I gave up all hobbies. So like any time I had on the weekends, like I was taking them to the zoo, we were flying kites, teaching them to ride a bike, swimming, just like poured myself into my kids. And then I ended up taking a role at Apple where I just traveled all the time. And when I wasn't traveling, I just wasn't mentally there. Like I wasn't physically present. Even
yeah,
though I'd have been in the room, my mind was elsewhere. And so I'd say I missed out on a lot. Like I missed out on birthday parties due to travel. I missed out on just important events, school events. I wasn't there to mentor, like pour into them like I would have liked to have been. So like when I look back on my career, there's been some great accolades. I'd say that's one area that you can't ever do anything over, but if I could do it over, I definitely
yeah.
would do part over of my life. So there's good memories there, but I know there were a lot of times when I just wasn't there, and those are moments that you just can't get back. So hopefully people can think about that when they're balancing work and life. You got to really have a good balance.
Well, in those moments, I imagine there wasn't like deliberate, hey, I'm choosing Apple over my family. It was kind of like a casual process almost, right? Or was there ever a moment when you're like, gosh, this is hurting my family. I need to change again? Or did that not come again because it was just like this casual process of
It was always on my
focusing on
mind. I think
Apple?
for me, my intention was to provide things for them that I didn't have growing up.
Okay.
So that was the motive. I think the motive can get skewed at times, and I think there were times where it was like, okay, well, like, how much is enough?
Yeah.
And what point is it maybe the lack of time or being away is more impactful in a negative way than the benefits of the income or, material things. I don't, thinking back, like I never remember a time where I felt like I was purposely choosing work over kids. I think I was trying to be a good provider. And again, I think it goes back to our earlier conversation. Like there was just, my dad had a lot of impact, but he didn't bring in a lot of income. And I was trying to bring
Yeah.
in the income, but maybe I lost a little bit of the impact with the
Yeah.
kids. Yeah.
I
But I did
think,
finally make a decision. I realized like the smart financial move would have been to stay at Apple. I'd probably still be there today, or maybe I'd probably be retired at this point. But I did finally end up deciding to make a career change because I realized, wow, I'm just, this is just too much.
yeah. Well, I think a lot of people that I've interviewed, they've said that they typically were motivated to provide for their kids in ways that they didn't have.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny how that works with us from generation to generation. And maybe somebody that grew up with a lot of money has a different, desire for their kids. Because I like you, I mean, I didn't have a ton of money. And so I think early in my career, financial security was my number one priority. Right.
Yeah.
And my dad and mom, throughout high school, I mean, we had nothing. I was free lunch and free clothes at the local secondhand store,
Yeah.
and I remember just saying, I never want my kids to experience this. And so I think it's interesting how we kind of swing this pendulum in that generational shift, and I've heard that from many people.
It is funny that you mentioned that though, because my girls, neither one wants to go into like a super lucrative field financially, I guess, because they've probably had more. But they both like they're both focused on helping people. They want to both be clinical psychologists and just work with people. So I guess one of the good things coming out of it is at least maybe with them having some things that I didn't have as a kid, like they're less motivated on the material side. And again, I'm not saying anything negative about material things. I think we can really help people the more we can. I think bringing in income and having good investments are a great tool to help people. So
Agreed.
certainly nothing
Agreed.
against material things at all.
Yeah, my job is managing money, so I agree that there can be good. I think the question that always comes back to you is there I don't think there's a direct correlation between more money and more impact, more money and more happiness, more money and more fulfillment. But there's probably some point where there's a diminishing return, right? Where you have enough money to create that impact. And then at some point you have too much money that it's not going to make any difference. For you, you said you didn't realize when it was enough. Do you feel like at this point in your career, you've been in the work field for 30 plus years. Do you have an idea of when enough is enough at this point, or is it different than what you had anticipated 20 years ago? How do you look at that?
I think it's a great question. For me, now more is less about income and it's more about impact. I don't think
Yeah,
I'll ever retire. It was funny when I was younger. I'm like, oh, and I've not reached 50 yet, but I always said I'm going to retire at 50. And then I think I read a book on the blue zones. I don't know if you're familiar with
yeah,
that.
yeah. Very
They
familiar.
talk about the highest proportion of people that have lived to 100 or older. And one of the commonalities of all those seven, I think there's seven around the globe, is that people never fully retire. So they're
Yeah,
always investing in their community or doing something. Now, they may not be working 80 hours a week or 50 hours a week or whatever, but they're still active. So yeah, I don't anticipate I'll ever retire. I really, for me, my work is my life and my life is my work. So they're both connected. So
yeah,
I think for me, yeah, I look at it more now about just impact. And impact to me is I look at my dad and he had a lot of impact on people's lives that wasn't in a monetary sense. But then I look at some of the people that he impacted and they've gone on to do incredibly well in their life and they've been very successful and then they're able to help people in different ways. So I think for me, it's just how can I always be adding value to people? I think the day I'm not adding value to someone is the day that maybe I retire. And I hope that never happens.
it's so funny. I feel like that's a new rhetoric, right? Like this, we had this idea in America that, you white knuckle through 60
Yeah.
into 65,
Yeah.
you suffer through whatever kind of hell is given, and you work at the same place for 40 years because they're going to give you great benefits.
Yeah.
And then you can enjoy life.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of your military guy. So I don't know if you read the like Hanoi Hilton, that story where the admiral there, I'm forgetting his name.
Stockdale.
Yes,
Yeah.
Stockdale.
Yeah.
He talks about the Stockdale paradox is what it's been called, right? Is the people that were in the prisoner of war camp that said we're going to be out by Christmas, or we're going to be at this day, by this day, by this day, by Easter, by New Year's. Those are the people that struggled the most,
Yeah.
right? Was I'll be happy when,
Yeah.
rather than the people that accepted the reality of being in the prisoner of war camp and said, I'm going to make life as good as I possibly can in this very moment. Even though I'm in a prisoner of war camp, I'm not going to wait until some future day. He said those people were far more successful both during and after that event. And so it's this idea of like, when retirement comes, I can finally do something better
Yeah.
with life
Yeah.
versus, like you said, I'm never going to retire. I'm going to live life with purpose forever because that's my vision. Right? I really love that. And it's something that I'm just newly, I guess, in the same place as.
You never know.
You.
And one thing to add to that, you never know when your time's going to come.
Yeah.
The number of people that I've known, that have been so hardworking. Like they invested their life because they wanted to retire and just eventually enjoy their life. And they either never came or they got a couple of years and that was it. My
Yeah.
father-in-law passed away and he got 5 years. That's great. But like 5 years, like
Wow.
I don't want to work 7 days a week to get 5 years to enjoy my life. Like I think you can enjoy your life and still work hard and add value. And I hope that more people, I think in our society, as you say, I think things are shifting and people recognize that. I think it's our duty as leaders to make sure too that we're encouraging people. Like when you take your time off, take your time off. Don't be on conference calls or looking at your emails. Like actually enjoy your time.
Well, you mentioned, and I've seen this, you're really passionate about mentoring the next generation of leaders. Is that sounds like something that gives you purpose no matter where you're at, no matter what job you're doing, right? Head of transformation today at Ford, you're still mentoring and that's driving purpose. You want to talk more about kind of that as a
Yeah.
priority for you?
Yeah. There's nothing that will make my day more than either my kids calling me and telling me they love me or someone reaching out and saying, hey, would you give me some advice on something or would you be willing to mentor me? Like, I love that.
Yeah.
It's so great. So it's such an honor. I think for me, it's so important because I had a lot of good mentors early in my career, whether it was in the military, my company commander that was just really poured into me and showed that he believed in me as not just a soldier, but a human being. And he recognized that I didn't want to make a career out of the military. I wanted to go and, have a successful business career. And he was so supportive, allow me to go take courses at night when he could have easily said no. That was a huge impact. My first boss at Home Depot, she was phenomenal. I basically was like an apprentice for 4 years under her, and she taught me so much. And I'll never forget. I know we don't have time to get deep in the story, but she sent me out on this assignment for 30 days where I went to all the fulfillment centers around the US and I talked to people and I tried to figure out what their pain points were and what issues they were struggling with. And I came back and I put together this whole plan of action thinking she was going to take it to her boss and present it. And she said, be back here in an hour. You're going upstairs to the top floor. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, it's your work. You're going to get the credit for it. So it was just those moments like where I think we've all had probably some leaders that weren't the best leaders in the world, but I've had some that were so great that it just overshadows anyone that didn't, meet my expectations or live up to what I would have expected. For me, yeah, I think it's important. I think it's easy as leaders to get so focused on our own little world that we lose sight of those around us. And I think the true impact of a leader, and I think John Maxwell said it, is, the true measure of a leader is the leaders that are in their wake. And what I mean by that is I'm not necessarily making that person to a great leader, but even if I have a 1% impact on them, like think about if everyone that were in leadership roles had just a tiny impact on a human being's life, how much impact that would equate to over their lifetime.
Absolutely. Um, at times in roles that I've had, it felt like I didn't have capacity to be a mentor. Um, how have you dealt with situations like that? And is it just you got to leave that environment, or is that a problem that I should have resolved on my own? Like how do you view that?
No, I don't fault you for that. I've had times in my career again where I'm just so overwhelmed with the daily fires or also just managing family life as well. It's hard.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's two things. One, it's just being intentional. A good mentoring session doesn't have to be an hour long. It doesn't have to be formal. It could be 5 minutes. It literally could be someone saying, I think probably the funnest part I had in my career, part of the time when I was at Apple, I went back and got a certification for coaching because I wanted to be able to coach people well. And when I say coaching, it was life coaching, it was performance coaching. Just think about how can you help someone overcome barriers. And what I learned by that is everyone has the answer inside them. I can't give someone the answer. At the end of the day, if I do that and it doesn't work, then there's no ownership. So, but the best thing I can do is actually just show up in the moment. So I think for me, being a good mentor and having a good mentoring session is literally dropping everything, being completely present like we are right now
Mm.
and just being there for someone. That energy will help them like find in many cases the answer they're looking for, or at least put them on the right path. The other piece is just caring. Like if you care about someone, and they know you care about them, that unlocks huge potential in a human being.
No, I like that. I think you're right. I think even, I think through people I've worked with in the past, and it goes back to money, the same concept, right? more time didn't equate to more empowered, more cared about, more supported. It was really, to your point, like this feeling of undivided care,
Yeah.
right? That whether it was 5 minutes or 5 hours, the the genuine, authentic, just human connection was more powerful than the amount of time. And I actually, that's a good realization for me today. So thank you.
If I could just one thing on that
Yeah,
too,
go for it.
I'm really excited about AI and the ability to help automate or take out some of the time of tasks that aren't super human connected.
Yeah,
Hear people talk a lot about, oh, AI this or AI that. Actually, I think it can be great because I envision a future where there's leadership gets back to its roots, which is a lot more focusing on one-on-one coaching,
yeah,
development, being present with someone versus constantly be buried in the emails or the reports. And the emails and the reports, there's good things about those. I don't know that we'll ever get rid of that, but I think my hope is that thinking about, I mean, I'm finding benefits today where I'm leveraging AI to do stuff that normally would have taken, even if it was 10 minutes. If I get 10 minutes back, I can go take 10 minutes and like actually be present with
care
someone
about
and like figure
somebody.
out what's going on. Yeah.
No, I agree with you on that. Yeah, I think the one thing I was challenged in one situation. It was basically to create an AI sales algorithm, right? And if we think about sales, it's relationship based, right? I believe, anyways, the best sales is, you care about that person, they experience your care in trying to solve a problem that they have. It's not a I'm persuading somebody to use me for something they may or may not actually need. It's, hey, I want to solve a problem that you have. And I think that interaction is so nuanced, right? And in every situation, it could go a different direction. And in one setting, we were asked to basically create a if-then statement for every action that the client or prospective client did, right? If
Yeah.
they send this email, we send this, and if they respond this way, and it just was too complicated. I mean, there were thousands of permutations that could have existed. And so when we think about AI, I think where humans need to lean in, like you said, is that human to human connection that likely won't be replicated in AI, at least anytime soon. And I think that power is going to forever live with the human race, and not robots, hopefully.
I hope so.
I hope so, anyways. I think there's some fears there, but yeah, hopefully that lives with the human race. One of the things that was really impactful in my working with you is you recommended this book called The American Icon.
Yeah.
It's about Ford's story of basically surviving in 2007, 2008, when the other automakers took on hundreds of millions of dollars in government bailouts and Ford didn't, and they somehow made it through. And it's just got some amazing principles. I think it was life-changing for me to read that book. Can you talk to me about maybe some of your thoughts and why you recommend that book to people? And
Yeah.
then I know that now you're working on your own book that has I think a piece of that inspiration maybe came from that book, but would love to hear kind of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that book is just so powerful. And I'm so glad you liked it. I've recommended it to a number of people and had quite a few people that came back and said, wow, that book was great. So it makes me feel good. It's not just me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
other people got something out of it. I've read a lot of books in my life. I've always been an avid reader, something that I learned from my grandfather. He was just always reading. And so for that book to jump out means a lot because I've read so much out there. There's like Ray Dalio's Principles, another one of my favorite books, but I love The American Icon for a couple of reasons. One, I was introduced to it back in 2017, 2016. I had a chance to meet Alan Mulally. So Alan Mulally was the
Wow.
former COO of Boeing,
Yeah.
and he was handpicked by the Ford family to come lead Ford. And then he backed out and went back to Boeing, and then they eventually convinced him to come join and lead the company. He also, now this, everything's a team sport, but under his leadership, he really helped steward the company and like shepherd the company through a really tough time. As you mentioned, all the other automotive OEMs took bailouts, and Ford was the only company that did not. So it's pretty impressive. I think for me, it was, and now actually being at Ford's interesting to see how much of that's left versus maybe it's been forgotten. But that book to me was incredibly important because it just really resonated on the importance of this one team concept. And he talks about one plan. I'm not sure, I don't believe he used the word one team. I think he called it one plan. But this is where, and I'm working on a book called One Team Leadership, is the power to be able to bring a team and group of people together from different backgrounds that have different motives and motivations, that have different agendas. But actually, if you can actually get them on the same page, you can accomplish pretty much anything, whether it was a space race and how Kennedy united the nation to send a man to the moon and return him safely to the earth, like that kind of moment. And that was, Ford had one of those moments where it was, hey, we have to quit doing things the way we've always done, because the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing, expecting a different result. And that's basically the mentality brought to the company to say, we can't continue operating like this. And he did it by unifying people. He did it by, and it wasn't just emotions. In fact, he got rid of a lot of the negative emotions through objectivity. So looking at data and metrics, but it really, to me, it was more than just the metrics and the data. It was ownership. So he set people up to be owners of their respective part of the business, and he helped them succeed as a coach and as a mentor and a leader. And so for me, it was hugely impactful when I read that. And I've tried to model my leadership. I don't try to copy. I'll never be Alan Mulally. I'm Ben Cook, but like I try to bring a lot of the principles that I've learned from that into the way I run a business or lead a business. And really it starts with, let's get on the same page. Like, what's our true north? Are we all on the bus together? Are we in the game together? Are we willing to make the sacrifices needed to make sure the team's successful? Are we thinking about the long term and not losing sight of the North Star? Do we have the right accountability system set up to make sure that we're achieving things? And then, by the way, when we're off plan, do we have the courage to raise our hand and say, hey, I need help. I'm not succeeding. And it's less about ego and it's more about the team. And so I learned a lot of that from the military as well. I just like the way Alan brought these principles together in a real life case study. It wasn't just some theory, and it was literally, it helped save an American. Like, I can't think of a company more iconic than Ford. Like, you got Ford, Hershey. There's a few companies out there that have been around for as long as Ford has, but there's not many like with that status in our country.
Well, one of the stories in that book that will stick with me forever is when he walks into their first board meeting and the company is nearing bankruptcy, and they have all their KPIs up on the screen and everything's green, right? And he just says, how is this possible that you are all so successful at your jobs, yet the business is near bankruptcy? And it took several of these meetings before the first person comes with a red, right? And I remember he celebrated that person that came with a red on the KPI report. And I have been at companies where the company is near failure and people have created their own metrics of success to make them feel good, independent of company performance. And you realize just how dangerous that is to the overall company. And the one team approach isn't, am I successful and my peers aren't? It's, are we successful?
Yes.
Right. And I think that story really highlighted that to me. Alan Mulally was able to celebrate failure, was able to celebrate mistakes, was able to create an environment where somebody failing wasn't a moment of, stone the failure. It was, let's help him succeed. Let's help this person be better. And I think that your one team mentality that I've learned from you and from that book is, we got to help each other.
Yeah. We're a team. We're a team. I look at sports today, and maybe sports aren't always the best analogy with the free agent system and everything else. But like at the end of the day, a team wins, or, the team's either going to win together or they lose together. Like, there's no accolades for, I threw 300 yards this game, but we got beat in the Super Bowl. Like, to me, that's not winning. Like, the team, I'd rather have 100 yards passing, but not give up the ball, and we win the game by 1 point and win the Super Bowl. Like, that's a bigger success than shattering the record for the game. Yeah, I think to me, it's just a matter of trust too. Like, I've never been in a position where I didn't come in, and even if the company was succeeding, there's always room for improvement. There's always some metrics that are red. And I've experienced this everywhere I've gone, where people come in with the green, and it's not just, people don't want to fail. Like, no one wakes up. No one wakes up and says, "Oh, I'm going to go fail today at work. Like, I'm going to do a terrible job." I just think that many cases, it goes back to our mentoring comment. leaders have to take the time to set up the environment so that everyone can win together. And if they don't do it, then it's not going to just happen through osmosis. Like it literally has to be a concerted effort on the leader's part to create a culture like that.
One of the risks, I guess not risks, one of the barriers I've seen in like this one team approach is if you have a competitive environment, right? And in some ways, competitive environments are good, right? They drive peak performance. People want that person's job, right? Or people want somebody's job, or people want to move up in the company. And in so doing, what I find is subconsciously, we almost celebrate somebody's mistakes
Yeah.
because it gives us a chance to shine brighter than somebody that maybe is ahead of us in the progression. How have you addressed that in your career or within yourself?
It's a great question. I think the world's changing. And what I mean by that, historically, and we kind of talked about this with retirement, it was expected that you go work for a company, you stay there 30 or 40 years, you
Yeah,
retire, and then you live your life. And that naturally, I think in many cases did breed these environments or create these environments where it was a zero sum game. So in order for me to have more, to be more successful, to be seen as more successful, then I've got to occupy a certain point on the org chart. And if someone's in that seat, then, they've got to move for me to be successful. I think now and we have Dan Pink wrote a book back years ago. I think it was in like the early 2000s. It was called Free Agent Nation. And he talked about, and he saw it coming. He said, we're going to quickly move to a society that's more of a free agent nation. It's like the portal today in college football.
yeah,
So and I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily love all aspects of it, but I do think we've created more of a system where if you're adding value, but you don't see the path in front of you, it's no longer that you have to get into someone's role at the company you're at. If you're adding value, people are going to notice it, and there's
yeah,
opportunities to move to another company. So I posted something a few weeks ago on LinkedIn. I talked about, I actively encourage my employees to look outside as well.
yeah,
By saying that, I'm not saying I want you to leave the company. It's, hey, you need to think about yourself first and foremost. As a leader, I'm going to do everything I can to create a great career path for you, assuming that you give it your all and you're capable and competent and you're evolving in your knowledge and skill sets. But at the end of the day, like, I don't control everything, nor does the employee. So I think it's just this matter of like, let's do what we can as leaders to create these opportunities, but recognize and celebrate if someone finds a better opportunity outside, like, encourage them, celebrate
yeah,
that. That's something to be celebrated. It's not a bad thing if people leave. And I think that's maybe a little bit different. I think there's still a lot of leaders that view it as a failure if they don't keep someone in the company forever. And that's just not the case. It's not about you as the leader. It's about that person. It's about their financial obligations to their family and themselves. And so I think we have to just be open to celebrate that and do what we can. Like, let's create the career paths where we can, but don't celebrate people for, undermining someone else to get in their role. Don't celebrate someone for one-upping someone in the meeting. And I've worked in
yeah,
cultures like that where it was like encouraged. And I
yeah.
quickly left those companies because that's not the principles that I live by.
No, I've seen that too. Give me 1 second. My daughter just came.
Hello. Hi.
All right, sorry about that.
No worries. Those are the good days, the good
That's
times
it.
today.
Yeah, I thought my door was locked, but yeah, I like that. Jumping back in. I do want to make one comment about as I look at sports through that business perspective, which I feel like you do a lot here. You look at certain high performance athletes, and I think the most stark one for me is like a James Harden in basketball. Dominates the stat line, right? And has for years, right? Historically, he was one of the highest scoring players, got great percentages here, great percentages there, but has never won a championship. And he's tried to move to all these different teams and never really been successful at winning a championship. And you look in the NFL right now, and you have a similar experience with like an Aaron Rodgers or others where they care so much about their individual stat line or their individual name or glory or their that the team suffers. And you contrast that with like a Tom Brady, and I don't know Tom Brady intimately, so I don't know him at all, but I don't know if this is totally accurate. But you look at what they did at the Patriots, and he was there for years, not making a ton of money relative to what he could have been making, and created the most dominant NFL franchise that I've seen in my lifetime. So it's interesting how we look at like this one team concept is I think a universally applicable concept across every major organization, whether it's, religion, whether it's sports, business, your family. So I really like that. I'm excited to read your book because I'm sure there's
I
lots
have
of
Tom Brady. I have a
applicable.
case study about Brady in there, and we talk about that. And
Really?
then I've tried to pick a couple of obscure teams as well, where the team went on to do really well. But if you look at the output was greater than the sum of the parts, like the synergy that the leader brought to that. When you look at the players on paper, like in many cases, like when I pick there's a soccer team out of England back in the 60s and 70s that were incredibly successful, but they didn't have like any high profile stars on the team. It was
Yeah.
all about team chemistry. That's something my dad taught me, and something I read about, oh, my mind just went blank. The 49ers, you had Rice in Montana and Bill Walsh, sorry.
Yeah.
In his book, Bill Walsh's book, he talks about team chemistry. And so he saw it one day when Rice was running routes and Montana was throwing the ball to him. He's like, these two are just on the same page. And so the more you can sync up your team, where like the team literally is on the same page, they can finish each other's sentences. Like there's something incredibly powerful, and I'll take that any day over a bunch of A+ players that can't gel or have the right chemistry.
Love that. Are you open to sharing details about your Tom Brady case study too? How you structured that in the book?
Well, I'll say more to come. Like read
Yeah.
the book,
Yeah. Yeah.
but and again, I don't know him. I never have had the chance. I'd love to interview him. It's all stuff that I researched, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's a component. There was a selfless component, and he was tough. He was very demanding, but at the end of the day, you're right. Like he freed up salary cap for certain players that they wanted on the team that they wouldn't have been able to afford. So he personally took a hit financially to set the stage for a champion team to be able to get the right people, which is awesome. Like how many
It's
people do
amazing.
that? You don't hear that story very often. I think people need to talk more about that.
Well, you look at what that says too, and I would love to ask you personally, like money wasn't his primary motivation,
Right.
right? Tom Brady said, I'm gonna win Super Bowls,
Uh-huh.
and that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna make money along the way. And you've mentioned a few times, like you're in business now to impact people, to help people. When did money stop being the motivation for you?
Probably when I lost it all.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a startup that I joined that I put a significant amount of money in. And I should like looking back, like it was almost like, and I'm not a gambler by any
Yeah.
means, but it was almost like I went to the table and like just went all in on a game of poker. And it was like, why? Because I'm not a gambler. Like I'm
Yeah.
not a gambler by nature. I hate losing money. But it was one of these things where the hype was there, like the CNBC was covering the company and there were articles and it was poised to be this next big thing. And for some reason, I got caught up in it. And it was this moment. And if I look back, and I had to self reflect on this quite a bit. And I was trying to take the easy route. Like it was a
Yeah.
quick payout. And it's like, oh, then I can. And it was like this mentality of, oh, and then I can go have a bigger impact on the world because I can go, I'm going to make all this money. I'm going to put some money in. I'm going to make a ton of money. And then, my intention was, was good in terms of my motive. Like I wanted to help people, but there's no free lunches. Like there's no quick success. There's no overnight success. Like, anything that is worthwhile, has taken years of preparation. Even people that launch a startup and it gets acquired quickly, there was still years that went into that preparation,
Yeah.
whether it was the creativity of coming up with a concept, securing the capital, bringing the team on board.
Yeah.
Like nothing just happens overnight. So I think that's when I lost it and realized, you know what, there's more to life than money. And by the way, like I can have a major impact on people. At the end of the day, I didn't want the money for the greed, for the sake of the money. I wanted to have an
Yeah.
impact. but the reality was it was just a poor way of going about it. So sometimes you have to learn the hard way in life. And I
Yeah.
bring that story up just for other folks. Like if you're looking at something and it seems to be too good to be true, possibly it's too good to be true, more than likely.
I think I think that part of the problem we have is that we highlight and celebrate overnight successes
Yeah.
so much in this society, right? And the media doesn't tell the journey. We only see they started a company and 3 years, 4 years, 5 years later, they're 100 millionaires, right? Or whatever, the journey is. And so it's easy to believe that to have FOMO, and I think one of the things you talk about in your one team methodology is that there's a clear purpose, a true North Star, right? The common theme amongst all of the people I brought on here is that you have to have a definition of what you believe success is for your life, or else you end up adopting other people's views of success, right? And that's where you invest in a business that in hindsight, you have no idea why you invested in because FOMO was driving you to invest in this opportunity. You have any comments on that specific?
Yeah, I think the Japanese have a phrase called Kaizen,
Yeah.
continuous improvement. James Clear talks about it in Atomic Habits, 1% better daily. So this concept of I'll use the gym. It's New Year's Day. I'm going to get in shape this year. I'm going to go to the gym 2 days and I'm going to be buff and like in super. No, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
It is, I'm going through knee surgery right now. I'm looking at I was with my physical therapist last night and I said, you know, what's sad? It's like, it took me years to build my calves up to the strength that they are. And it's taken like days for my right leg to atrophy and like my muscle has just shrunk so much. But it's a good reminder of like, is anything worthwhile takes time and it's that consistent daily effort. And I'd rather have 1% better every day than going and playing the roulette table, hoping that I hit, the
Yeah, something
jackpot or
big.
whatever. Yeah. I guess that's the best way I can say it is, again, it's just the mindset. You're so right too. John Wooden, the famous coach from UCLA, said success is peace of mind, which comes from knowing that I gave the best effort that I'm capable of giving. So if you look
Yeah,
at that, the beauty of that is it frees you from the outcome. As long as you're giving your very best, what can anyone ask of you besides that?
I like that a lot.
It's not, and again, it's not necessarily how you start the race. How do you finish it? Like, do you finish it with your head up, doing the best you can? You may stumble a couple of times along the way, but as long as you get up, that's why I love the Olympics. I love it when a sprinter, I don't love it for them, but I love it when I see a sprinter that maybe falls down and they're out of the race, but they get up and they still run it out anyway.
I like that a lot. No, I think that you just a key point there that the outcome is less important than the journey, right? And I love that. So I know we're almost up on time here. Anything else you want to make sure we talk about in these last few minutes that you want to share with people?
Yeah. One, again, thank you. Love talking to you and also very inspired by you. You're just such a great principled leader and good father and good husband, I know. So just awesome. Having people
Thank you,
like that
Ben. That
come into
means
my
a
life.
lot.
Such an honor. I think the only thing I would say is just two things. One, a call to action. So for those of you that are maybe like myself or even further along in your career than I am, the importance is really about this next generation of leaders that are coming up. So whatever you can do to encourage someone today, show someone you care about them, spend 5 minutes just checking in on someone to see how they're doing. You don't have to have the answer, and it's less about the answer. It's more about caring and just, being there for people. And I think, as leaders, we're responsible for the care the care of the people that have been assigned within our organizations or in our lives. And then I think for people that are newer to their career, and also equal important call to action is show up with your ideas, be bold. Like, we need fresh ideas. We need you to be unhindered, but also please temper that with respect for that there are a number of people that have gone before you that have been fighting the fight a lot longer, and they may have scar tissue over something. They may have learned something the hard way, and like, listen to them. Like, the best thing you can do is make your own mistakes, not repeat someone else's mistakes. I always say that is I want my kids or my loved ones or my friends or people that work with me. I want them to make their own mistakes, like learn from my mistakes that I made in life and like don't make the same mistakes that I have. So I call it bold humility, like be bold, but be humble. And then on the flip side, like show up, like embrace people if you're further along in your career and take time to mentor and also listen. Like just because you've got 20 or 30 years in business, I certainly don't have all the answers by any means, and I'm learning stuff every day from people much younger than myself. So it's a symbiotic kind of world in a good way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think, yeah, don't take yourself too seriously on either end
Yeah.
of the spectrum, but be willing to collaborate. I think I'm very young, and to have somebody like you and other senior leaders that I've worked with in the past to take my ideas seriously as we work together has been really impactful, knowing that you have 20 years experience on me. So I think you live and embody what you just said to other people, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for coming
Thank you.
on.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a happy new year,
You as well.
and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks so much.